Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. There are two different worldviews popularly available in the world about the way the creation has taken place. One way the worldview is that there was a energy in the form of, say, sun, and separated that energy, and that mass of energy that is there condensed to become the earth, and then on top of the earth, and further it cooled down. When it cooled down, the temperatures and all conditions were good enough to see that the water is there and this is there, and then life started. So that means to say, energy or matter was supposed to be the primary, and then later on, the life, consciousness, everything becomes like a secondary. So therefore, they say that if man is having this consciousness, it is something which is a later product after the matter. Not only that, various other things also, like for example, brain is the matter, and a particular functioning of the brain, they call it as mind. So mind should be an after product of the matter called as the brain. Similarly, that life is also supposed to be after product of what is like the respiration, the breath that we are taking, and then out of which the life has come. The breath stops, life stops. This is how some worldview, that is matter is the base of the universe, and then universe is created, and later on this consciousness. But then they started thinking, where is this consciousness coming from? One simple idea that people had is that maybe it is the thinking, analysis, and all that intellect. And a product of that intellect is supposed to be the consciousness, the I, the perceiver, or the ego. So ego is the product of the conscious, ego is the product of the mind. So mental activity or the brain activity is supposed to be ego. Like that, there are a lot of people who have this particular worldview. Then where do you place this consciousness? What is the location of consciousness? So there are different questions that are there. Scientists are facing those questions. But this is one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is the way that Sanatana Dharma, ancient Indian wisdom, they came up with the idea, and that is consciousness is the base of the universe, and then matter is the further development from the consciousness. What is the reason for assuming this, accepting this kind of a position that consciousness is primary and the matter is supposed to be secondary? A very simple reason for that is that consciousness seems to be where we call that consciousness, where there is a degree of freedom. Like for example, something unconscious does not have the freedom to move, freedom to participate, freedom to do anything. Whereas the moment that consciousness comes, then you see that the movement is possible, activity is possible. You can see that somebody is unconscious. First thing that we do is we test to see that whether that person can respond to the talk. He has the freedom to respond to the talk. If he is not responding, that means he is not conscious. But if he responds, then he is consciousness. A very simple response, like open your eyes, and the person open your eyes. Oh yeah, now he is conscious. Or move your hand, he moves the hand. So that indicates that idea of presence of consciousness. So that immediately gives us the idea that consciousness is supposed to be the degree of freedom. The second thing is that when we tell, he hears. Open your eyes and that fellow hears. That means to say, not only that he has freedom, but also he has the feeling. He has to open his eyes. He has to hold me tight, move his hand. This feeling is also another part of this consciousness. So that means to say, within the human being, if anything that is we having the freedom or the feeling, it is the consciousness within. So that human being is somebody who is having At the very grossest level is the physical body. At the subtlest level, that there is consciousness. So it is the consciousness which is responsible for the freedom and also feeling. These two things are available for the consciousness. So now the next immediate logical projection is that where what has the freedom originally can give up its freedom to become something of a lesser freedom. If it does not have a freedom at all, then it cannot evolve into freedom. Freedom is something which should be primary, and that giving up the freedom is something which is an inherent part of the freedom itself. So let me give you a simple idea. The feeling that we have is that the moment that you have money, that you feel, wow, great freedom, because you can buy anything, you can do anything. It gives you such an economic freedom. So this is a very important thing, that having money, having bank balance, economic freedom. Now, what do you mean by that? That means to say, if I have money, I can buy anything, I can do anything, I can eat anything. All these things are the degree indicating about the freedom. But then money itself cannot feed me. Money itself I cannot live in the money. Money has to give up its freedom to become house, then I can live in that. Money has to give up its freedom to become cloth, then I can wear those clothes. But when I say that it give up freedom to become clothes, money could have given us the food, but then I cannot eat cloth. Cloth lost its freedom. It can only be a dress that I wear. Similarly, house I can live, but house I cannot fill my stomach. See, that means to say money had the freedom of all those things. And then giving up is the one that has given simple experience that we all have it. Same analogy when we continue, that beautifully the way that Indian philosophy, Sanatana Dharma looks at is, mind is a unit through which that seeing, hearing and all these things can take place, because they all connect to the mind. But then mind itself will not see, mind itself will not hear. Therefore, mind has to give up its freedom to become eyes, to give up its freedom to become ears, so that ears can only hear. Ears cannot do anything like seeing or anything like that. However powerful your ears may be, ears cannot help you to see. Similarly, the mind gives up its freedom to become a tongue. It can only taste, and it cannot take any other sensory perception. Therefore, that mind is the central unit, and these senses are its own tentacles, are its own openings through which that we go into the world outside to interact. This is what Upanishad says. Paranchikhani Vetran Swayam Bhuhu Tasmat Paran Pashyati Nantaratma. It is only going towards outside to see that we interact with the world outside. That's very important. Now, mind is also not the everything, that there is somebody behind that who became the mind. And that is the consciousness. It is a consciousness which works through the mind, through the senses to perceive. So ultimately, that who is experiencing what is seeing and what is hearing? It is a consciousness, which we call it as the Atmasthiti. So when we look at this way, that the whole nature itself is something which is the consciousness, the whole, whatever that is there, Brahman, or the God we call it as, or this, whatever the name that you give it. And that's what is the consciousness that is there. And now that consciousness which is there, everything, and because it encompasses everything, it gives everything, from which everything comes out, you cannot define it. You cannot say that it is within these boundaries. It is boundaryless. So therefore, that boundaryless existence is what we call it as Brahman. Brihatita Brahman. That means to say that what all encompassing is supposed to be Brahman. Now this Brahman, this universal consciousness, is something which has given up its freedom to become an individual unit. And that individual unit, first of all, is what we call it as Paramatma becoming a Jivatma. That means the individuation takes place. And that individuation takes place. Now, what happens is that an individual consciousness is now, though part of the universal consciousness, but it is within that it is separate. Like the way a wave from the ocean is also ocean, but as long as it is in the form of wave, it is separate from the ocean. But next moment that wave goes back into the ocean, becomes the same thing. Like that, this one unit of it, small unit, becomes separate, and that unit separate is what is called a Jivatma, or what is called as the individual consciousness. Now this individual consciousness has to interact. So therefore, basically, the individual consciousness which has formed has now divided into various three gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas, because if it has to exist, all these three things are necessary. That means there is the activity, and there is some steadiness, stability, and there is also what is called as the peace, harmony. So that means to say intelligence that is there. Sattva, rajas, tamas, all these three things are there. So it itself becomes three gunas. So therefore, from that it comes, and afterwards, this individual, the idea of when this comes, that individuation, and that's what we call it as individual consciousness, individual I, which is supposed to be asmita. So in Sanskrit, we have this word called asmita, that means individuation. Now it is supposed to experience and do the activity, and then has an identity that I am separate from you, I am different from you. So therefore, that this individuation, that is asmita, has three different types of manifestation. Asmita, we call it as a higher ego, or the super ego we'll call it as. And that super ego, asmita, involves in the activity world outside. Three different kind of activity takes place. Three different split has taken place. The same consciousness, they are not different from consciousness. It is coming from the consciousness itself. Like the way I said that the consciousness itself becomes food, itself becomes clothing. The same way, the consciousness itself has divided into these three different aspects of it. And one aspect is the doer consciousness, or the doer asmita. And the second thing is experiencer consciousness, experiencer ego, asmita. And third is the identifier ego. Things are very important for functioning, and that's how the functioning takes place. And this is there all over the nature. Man can articulate, but the others do not articulate. Like for example, a dog has a consciousness of identification as a dog. A cat has an identification as a cat. A flower has an identification of a flower, and the pollen has an identification of a pollen of itself. That's what is identification ego, or identification asmita. What we call it as jnatrutva, identification ego. Why it is like that? A cat can recognize a cat, a dog can recognize a dog. That means species identification is there available. Similarly, a pollen will go and mate with another kind of a pollen, so that the cross-pollination takes place and the plant is created. When the bee or the butterfly goes from one flower to another flower, the cross-pollination takes place, and that takes place because even that small little pollen has that identification. It is like the way that a jasmine flower will become jasmine flower, mates with that, and then jasmine tree is created. In fact, this has been so deeply ingrained in this culture of this place that in the villages, in the unschooled places, we used to hear that in the villages they would have two different banyan trees, and they would have married these two trees and said this is male banyan tree, a female banyan tree. That means these two separation joined together. So this identification of banyan tree with another banyan tree, rose flower with another rose flower, this identification is something which is very important. A dog will identify a dog, whatever may be the species or the type of dog, because that dog has so many varieties of things. But then a dog easily identifies another dog. And how deeply it identifies, Like, for example, once we were there in our family, myself, my son, in Fuji, this big Buddha statue there in Japan and Tokyo, and then we were there. Several people were there. Some people came with the dogs also. Nice, wonderful dog. They maintain the dogs. Actually, a Japanese house dog is much better than a human being in India. That's like that. And then so happened that one very smart looking lady walked in and she kept her vanity bag down. I suddenly noticed that every dog turned towards that. Wow. I didn't understand why these dogs specially looked at her. Men looking at her, I can understand. But the dogs turned their attention towards her. I asked my son, what happened? Papa, you know that lady's vanity bag may have a dog in that. That's why these dogs recognize. Actually, it happened like that. She opened the zip of the vanity bag and some little creature came out of it. If my son would not have said that it is a dog, I would have thought it may be a rat. Size is only so much, but the dog recognizes the species of dog. So therefore, basically, what is this identification? Why is it important for consciousness? To maintain the creation, to maintain the species, identification is necessary. I go for a walk with my dog once in a while in Bangalore, morning walk. Without the dog, when I walk, I see that, very peaceful, and I go and come back, everything is all right. But the day when I take my dog, we are walking on the street, but I hear the dogs barking from the neighborhood houses. That means they can smell that some dog is there on the street. Wow. I feel depressed because I'm not recognized. My dog is recognized. Ego hurts. So one very important aspect of our ego is the identification. This is what is Jnatrutva ego. In Sanskrit, we call it Jnana, means identity, identification. Jnatrutva, identification ego. Asmita. The second thing is the experiencer ego. That means to say, if I have to survive in this world, or any species that survives in this world, experiences pleasure and pain, experiences heat and cold, all these experiences are there. Similarly, we can see that when somebody is in coma state, you try to tap him, you prick him, call his attention, say, do you experience the pain? He says, yes. That means experiencer belongs to consciousness. So therefore, that like the way that identifier ego, asmita, similarly, experiencer asmita is created within us. And that is what is called as the bhoktrutva ego. Bhoga means it's experience, pleasure and pain. How deeply it is there within us is that you are nicely sleeping, suddenly the temperature goes down, you don't even wake up. Subconsciously, that very experience of cold, you pull the covers on top of you without even disturbing. See, that means how deeply that you are working. It saves you. The experiencer ego is very important. So first is the Jnatrutva asmita, second one is the Bhoktrutva asmita, and third one is the Kartrutva, that means the doer. It's very important for us. When the wings of the birds are there, birds have the wings and then they have to fly, so that the wings become stronger. By flying, that the wings become stronger. If you don't allow the wings to operate, the bird lose that wings. Somebody has done a very beautiful, a beautiful small little incident that is there, maybe from the real life. Somebody was very compassionate, and then there were two cocoons were there, and from that, the butterflies were struggling to come out. When the butterfly is taking birth, actually it has to break open that cocoon and then struggle to come out. It's a big struggle. It's like the way the child coming out of the mother's womb. It's such a huge struggle. The butterfly is struggling. Then he was a good Samaritan. He had a good idea to help that butterfly. But when both these things are coming out, he didn't know how to help both. So he thought at least one I can help, the one doesn't. So he took a very nice scalpel and all something like that, very medically this thing. And then he gently cut open that particular cocoon that was there, shell, and from that the butterfly came out. Meanwhile, the other cocoon, other butterfly also struggled. Maybe it has taken 2-3 more minutes than this butterfly. He came out. What we found out is that this butterfly which came out naturally, the moment he came out of all the struggle of that cocoon and came out, just simply flew away. Whereas this butterfly, who he released it, came out and struggled to fly. That means that what he thought to be a struggle to come out of cocoon was actually training for the wings to fly. Kartrutva, doer is very important thing. So we have these three things. The lungs have to start functioning so that the breathing takes place. In fact, what happens is when the child comes out, the child is supposed to breathe. Within next half a minute, the child is supposed to breathe. When the child does not breathe, the doctor will hold the child with the legs and then beats the child so that breathing takes place. Then you have to breathe yourself. That kartrutva, the doership has to come up. So these are the three important things that we have. The asmita, that means the I, individuation that has taken place. It is individuation is in the form of identification, in the form of experiencing, and the third is in the form of doing an activity. So kartrutva, bhoktrutva, jnatrutva, these three things are very important. Individuation, I. This is a big I, this is a positive I. So we all developed that. This is something which we developed even before all this body, everything is created. And from that, these things come up. This is what the scriptures say, that I wanted to become a human being. So I gathered everything and became a human being. I wanted to see that I created the eyes. I wanted to hear so that I created the ears. So this is how that ego is the one which is built up all those things. This is one ego. And this is a very useful ego. Not only at that time, if we recognize that we have this aspect of it, which is original of ours. Originally, I want to educate myself, then I study. Originally, I want to do the research, then I put my research into that. So like in this way that we have all throughout the life, this ego is something which is very important, which makes us to go in this particular journey. Asmita, which roughly translated in English as ego, because we don't have a better word than ego. But then let us call it as a positive ego, it is a constructive ego, useful ego, let us say about that way. But then this is something original ego. Originally that's what we are born with. This ego is something, there is another very important aspect of this ego is identifier ego. As I said, there is one identification that we have is the species identification. A cat identifies itself to be cat, a rat identifies itself to be rat. There is nothing like hierarchy in that. You are big and I am small, I am big and you are small. Nothing like that in the species at all those things. But I don't know why human being has that kind of feeling. But then there is another useful identification that we have in the human being, because that we created a society. Therefore, there are several things that are identification that is there within us, which are useful. Like the way that, the animals, they give birth. And initially also that animals have that identification with that role that they are the mother. Like a cow is a mother. The calf is there, gives milk to the calf. That identification is there, I'm the mother. Actually, this mother identification is there in many species. Like I remember that there was one YouTube video where a tiger kills a monkey in the forest because hungry. After killing the monkey, the tiger was just sitting there. Suddenly found that there are two little baby monkeys were one baby monkey was looking for her mother. Oh, this tiger realized now that mother monkey is not there because he ate. Therefore, this baby monkey is there. And then the she tiger, was carrying that baby monkey and then giving the milk for that baby monkey, giving her milk, and then protecting that baby monkey, and for protecting that baby monkey from the other tigers who are there jumping on that. Because after all, the tigers think that a monkey is the food to eat. But then they say, no, 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 this is not your food to eat. I protect it. That means the mother feeling is there in that particular. You just imagine, species is more important than the species is the feeling of mother. That's an extraordinary thing. So when we look at that, the species is secondary and the feeling of mother, the feeling of father, this is supposed to be more primary. That's why in our Indian scriptures we say that Matur Devo Bhava, Pitur Devo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava. That means to say immediately after the God we keep these feelings that's there within us, the identification, mother role, the father's role. So now we have this role identification. It's so important. If we have the role identification, we take care of it. How deeply we take care of it, we have such beautiful examples. You just, mother will be busy with some activity or the other, doing all kinds of things. But the moment that the child moves from the sleep, the mother immediately recognizes the child is waking up. I have to take care of it. How did the mother know? Any other sound may be there, the mother is not disturbed. But the moment that the child sound is there, mother is attracted towards that. So that means basically that this motherly feeling, motherly responsibility is something which is very important. Motherly ego, that's what is asmita. Father should have a father asmita. The children should have children asmita. It's very important. So we carry several roles that we play. So that's why this role asmita is there with us. In fact, you can see that a young girl who's like flamboyant, walking around, running around and jumping like a little kid, suddenly gets married. 1 year later, she has a little child. Nobody has to teach that little girl that you become like, you are like a mother. See, already that mother instinct has come within us. It's so natural for that. That means the role of mother is an identification that we have. Role of a father is an identification. Not only that, we should have the role of a teacher and the role of a student. So therefore, we can handle so many roles. And that role identification is something which is very important. It's not for you that role. It is not for you that asmita. It is that role has that asmita. The father's role has an asmita. And you are supposed to uphold the dignity of that father's role called asmita. Mother's role called asmita. The same way that if you are given a position, you have to uphold the role of that position. And that's something which is very important. While we are taking care of that activity, that role is something which is very important. So like that, we play several roles. A medical doctor is supposed to be a medical doctor. It says a role. When patient is there, he has to uphold that. If he does not do that, whatever may be the situation outside, but he has to really hold on to that role as a medical doctor, because it can only save the patient. If he does not hold that role, then he is not fit to be a medical doctor. There's a recently then one video that was there on the YouTube where a mother and a child were sitting on the flight, and the same row that there's another man, well built, with a beard and all those things, and then he was talking something on the phone, and this boy looks at that man, my God, look, it's so big, and all those things. And mother looks at him, frightened, terrified, saying that, no, don't talk to him, don't look at him, he's a terrorist, like that. And then she calls it a air hostess and say there is a terrorist sitting in Macton. And that air hostess comes, looks around, and there are passengers. Who is the terrorist? No, that man is talking to somebody on the phone, maybe something, instructions about all that. There is a passenger list and all those things. He says he's like that, ordinary passenger. No, I'm afraid of him. He should get out of this flight. No, madam, we cannot say that. He has to go with us. Find him a place far away from here. All this conversation, he also listened to all that. And that lady says that there are no other seats vacant. Very good. There is a place there, but only thing is I can't ask him to go. It's your problem, therefore you should go to the other place. After hearing this man just smiles and then says that, okay, madam, I'll go there and sit down. You don't worry about it. So he takes another seat, a little away, about 5-6 seats. Then later on, before that, this boy was eating something like some nuts or something like that. And then he choked while eating the nuts. And that man said that, boy, don't eat those nuts, not good for you. See, he's interfering with us. Immediately they were alarmed. This man, he is dangerous. Later on, it so happened that man sat there, and the boy continued to eat the nuts, whatever it is. And suddenly, when it became too much, he started choking. Not only that, he was almost losing his life, this boy. And then air hostess comes running and then see how it can be helped. Try to give him water. He's passing out because his consciousness is fading away. She didn't know what to do. Immediately she called, is there any doctor in the flight who can help us? This child is... Immediately this man comes. And the lady says, no, I don't want him to handle it. But that man did not hear. He just picked up the child, put him upside down, and then gave him a beating, and then the whole thing, choking, came out. I told you this choking is not, this nuts is not good for your health. All that. So I came, who are you? I said, I'm a doctor. I'm going for a conference in USA. And I'm a top surgeon in Germany, and all that he says about that. Wow. So the role identification is necessary. And this man says, after all those things, I'll go and sit back there. Meanwhile, the captain makes an announcement that for the help that you have rendered to save the boy, therefore your seat is upgraded, you go to the first class. So it's a very amusing incident, very important incident, that role you have to identify yourself with. And it's not that you are egoistic about it, it's your responsibility. Please understand this very carefully. It cannot become your ego. What do you mean by that it does not become ego? Ego is used in a very derogatory way, in a negative way. And we have in Sanskrit two different types of ideas that I said. One is asmita and the other is ahankara. Ahankara is ego. Asmita is, we don't have a better word, so let us say it's a positive or constructive ego. You are born with the constructive ego. You are not born with the negative ego. It is not yours. What is negative ego? Negative ego is that you are born as a human being, as a human species. That's all. You are one of the species, therefore that you are a human species. The identification. But if that being human being is a species, identification becomes your ego, which we call it in Sanskrit as ahankara. It's a bad ego. Then what happens is you isolate yourself from the world outside. Not only that, forget about the human being ego. Look at the way that these days somebody is with a dark skin, somebody with a light skin, and that skin becomes your ego. What an unfortunate thing it is. You are born as a man or you are born as a woman. Both of them are human beings. But then look at that ego. I'm a man is an ego. Or I'm a woman is an ego. This is what is negative ego. This is what is horrible ego. This separates us. One ego builds up the species and brings them harmony. Another ego is something which separates and takes us away. Look at the way, as I said earlier in example, that a tiger gives milk to the monkey, baby monkey. Where is the question of ego? I'm tiger and you are a monkey. Nothing like that. So that means to say that it's a positive ego, positive way that you need to take, that you are a tiger, you may be species, or you may be a monkey. All these things are taken to be like species ego, not as ahankara, but as asmita. When you take asmita, it should be wonderful. Similarly, what is the difference between somebody is a medical doctor? Fine, while he is doing a medical job, he is a medical doctor. Otherwise, other than that, he's not a medical doctor. He's free from that. He's like any other human being. That's what is the basic identification. But then he wants to be a doctor everywhere, then he'll be into trouble. That means to say, you are taking the responsibility of a role. As long as the role you are playing, you have the responsibility. Once you come out of the role, you are no more that aspect of it. This you carry beyond the role is what is called as ahankara. Like I'm a teacher, and asmita, as long as I'm teaching, I'm a teacher. But when I'm not teaching, I still consider I'm the teacher. That's what is ahankara. That means I'm burdened myself with that, even though when I'm not doing it. This is what very beautifully said in the Indian philosophy. There's a story that is, a king is there by name Raja Bhoja. Raja means king, and then Bhoja is his name. One of the illustrations ancient Indian times. He said, the moment I get down from the throne, I'm a Bhoja, I'm not Raja. That means I'm not a king the moment I get down from the throne. But unfortunately, today in the society, it happened like this, that even though they come out of that particular throne, they still continue to be the king. It's like this. A member of parliament can be there for 5 years, but when he is not elected, he lost his election, he lost even his deposit, he becomes ex-MP for a lifetime. Or a MP is only for 4 years or 5 years, and ex-MP can be for a lifetime. That ego of an ex-MP continues. Unfortunate. This is what is the ahankara. Like that, how many different ahankaras we carry? When we carry that ahankara, that means to say that role also gets bad name. That's one of the reasons why people use their power, people use their position, people use their money, all those things as the pieces of ahankara, ego, rather than something. Money is useful. Money is useful for taking care of the things. But money becomes my ego, my ahankara, negative ego. It isolates me from the world outside. My position, if it becomes ego, my position distances me from the people outside. The position is supposed to bring me back to the people. I have a capacity to take care of 100 people, therefore that I'm in a position where I'm with the 100 people. It is not to separate myself out. So asmita is something which unites us. Ahankara is something which divides us. Kartrutva can be ahankara. Bhoktrutva can be ahankara. The doer can be ahankara. The experiencer can be ahankara. And similarly, the identifier can become ahankara. So these ahankaras are the things which are basically bad in the society. And only thing is that it's the human species has this idea of ahankara. No other species has this ahankara. Unfortunately, that's what is the thing. This ahankara is the one which takes us away from the spirituality. Because what happens is, as I earlier said, that the whole thing, asmita is the one which is at the beginning of the consciousness creation itself in the first place. But whereas at that point of time, the world is not there, nothing is there, matter is not there, anything is not there. It's only asmita that was there. But then ahankara depends upon the matter outside. Your money is your ahankara. Money is outside. Your knowledge can be ahankara. The knowledge is outside. Your position, it belongs to the world outside. So the more and more that you nurture this ahankara ego, the more and more you identify yourself with the matter outside. The more and more that you identify yourself with the matter, that is what is materialistic. It can be understood easily if somebody becomes an egoistic about his position in the society, like he's a prime minister. Ego is there. It is necessary that prime minister should have an ego so that he has to do the prime minister's job. But it should not become his ahankara so that he isolates from the rest of the people. In the society, in the world outside, yes, one has to be careful for this. In fact, there's a one beautiful Zen philosophy, Zen story, very beautiful Zen story. I often quote that. This governor of Kyoto by name Kitagagi, he comes to a Zen master. And as soon as he comes in, there is a front desk, a boy sitting, student, and takes out his card, visiting card, and gives that boy, and gives this to your teacher Zen master. And the boy looks at the card, and the card says, Kitagagi, the governor of Kyoto. The moment that he read that governor of Kyoto, at once he became stiff, stood, saluted him, said, "Sir, please be seated. I'm so honored that you are here. I'll give this card to the Zen master. I cannot take you directly because the instructions are like that. I give this card to Zen master. Momentarily, I will come back and take you, fetch you there." So Kitagagi is waiting there, and then this boy goes inside and talking to somebody something. This boy gives the card there, puts it on the table. Then master glances at that particular card, continues to talk. The boy is becoming restless because he made the governor to wait there. 5-10 minutes after this boy restlessness, the master looks at it and takes that card in his hand, looks at for a couple of minutes. What is there to look at for a couple of minutes in that card? Oh, this boy is breathless almost. After that, Zen master gives the card back to the boy and says, "Give it back to him. Tell him, that fellow, why did he come here? Ask him to get out." Wow. This boy has a shock in his life, and then you can't say anything because Zen masters are strict. You can't, if you say anything, that he will beat you. You'll have a stick with it. So he goes outside, gives that card back to the person, Kitagagi, and says that master is busy. Master is busy, then I can wait here. Oh my God, his headache is going to be on my head. I can wait for an hour. No, he's very busy. You want me to come back after about a couple of hours? I'll come back. After all, he's a governor of Kyoto. He understands. He says, "My dear child, seems that there is some problem. Exactly tell me what really happened. Huh? Did you present this card to the master?" "Yes, sir, I gave this card to the master." "What did he say?" "Yeah, he waited for a while. He did not look at it. Although he looked at it, he did not immediately reply. Waited for a while. And then he told me, I'm telling his words. Please don't mistake me." And that he said, "Why this fellow is here, ask him to get out." Please, not my words. Kitagagi took that card, looked at it for about a minute, all that what was there in the card, and took out his pen and scratched the governor of Kyoto. Gave that card back to the boy. "Now give it to my Zen master." Oh, once again, I should go back to the Zen master with this card. I'm going to get the beatings today. This boy was trembling. No, it's all right. You go and give it to him. Boy goes there and gives that card to Zen master. The moment now Zen master looks at the card, with a smile, he said, "Wow, the Kitagagi is here. Ask him to come in. Why is he waiting outside?" Message is, governor of Kyoto is a job that you hold. You are not governor of Kyoto. You are Kitagagi. And governor of Kyoto has no business with the Zen master. If you come to Zen master as a governor, you have no place here. As a student, if you come, that is fine. That is something which is very important. Don't carry your role beyond what the role permits you. Otherwise, you are abusing the role. You are actually corrupting the role itself. How many people realize this aspect of it? They cross over from us without. It is the problem is not the role. The problem is it is the ahankara which creates problem to us. I go to a shop for buying my vegetable and I behave as if I'm the governor of place. No. Yes, governor gets hurt because governor has no business to go to the shopping place. As an individual, you go to the shopping place, you buy something and then come out. If somebody says something also, you are not hurt. But then we go there with our ego. This ego we need to shut down. We need to set it aside. This is what is very important. I see that again and again, people assert that. Forget about the whole thing. Once it so happened, one of the in IAS cadre, Indian Administrative Services, entry level is supposed to be the deputy commissioner, and they rise up in the levels and all that. And the last level is supposed to be the chief secretary, head of the whole state, administrative head. Very powerful position. And one day I came to my teacher, Shastriji, and when I came there outside, the chief secretary's car was waiting. And the moment I saw the chief secretary's car, Karnataka, I recognized that, and that man also, driver also recognized. Sir, salutations. I asked him who has come in this car. He said, some guest has come. Our CS guest has come, chief secretary. So it's all right. I went and said, I know that it must be a big person. And then he was conversing with Shastriji. And Shastriji introduced, stopped and said, Raghu, meet so-and-so. He's a deputy commissioner from Andhra Pradesh. I recognized immediately the mistake Shastriji has done. Introduced the highest level person to the lowest rank. And I immediately saluted him. I didn't want to embarrass at that moment. I saluted. I said, please, nice to meet you. Continue the conversation. I also participated in the conversation. In between, for a moment, Shastriji went inside. I took that opportunity to tell him that, sir, please don't mind Shastriji's words. He is illiterate about all these ranks and all that. I know that you are chief secretary of Andhra Pradesh. You are not a deputy commissioner. It is like introducing a super chief engineer as a junior engineer. He immediately smiled and said, no, Raghu, nothing like that. We became good friends. His wife is also there. Then Shastriji came and conversation continued. After they went, I told Shastriji that this was a mistake that has happened. Shastri felt very bad. Such a big mistake. But then I said, no, I told him. He did not mind it. Everything was okay. Later on, myself and Shastriji, we became good friends. We went to their house. By that time, she was like my elder sister. She was talking to me, his wife. And she said, Raghu, the day when Shastriji introduced my husband as deputy commissioner, my whole body was really having that itching because he's chief secretary and he's introducing as deputy commissioner. But today I feel that how it was. That's what is. Husband does not have a problem. Wife has a problem. See, whose ego, who is carrying? We carry so much of ego. This is what is identified ego. Similarly, like that, the kartrutva ego, you do the work. You are supposed to do the work, you do it. But then you carry the ego of doer. It is such a tormenting thing. I did it. You did it fine, but people have to acknowledge that you did it. Many times people keep saying that, oh, if I were not to be there, things would not have happened. Things will happen in any case. But you put yourself in position. Now everything is there, but it is I who have done it. Ultimately, when I came, the work has been done. Particularly in the case of organizations, people carry this ego beyond what is their measure that they can take it up. So this doer ego, you do it. But then you have to do it. Like the way that you are given a body, you have to do the exercise, you have to do it. The body will keep quiet, will behave, will be healthy if you do the exercise. But the same thing that you run a channel where the exercise is there on the TV, sit in front of it on a couch and eating potato chips and watching that, it will not give you exercise. Somebody says that no, by watching that channel, I'm doing cerebral exercise. Forget about it. Don't do all this kind of thing. Kartrutva ego, recognize between Kartrutva asmita and Kartrutva ahankara. Identifier ego, identifier asmita. Jnatrutva ego, Jnatrutva ahankara, asmita. Similarly, Bhoktrutva, experiencer. It's our experience. We cannot deny it. If I feel it is cold, it is definitely cold for me. I cannot deny that. People, out of challenge, they don't accept their experience. People, when they go into that kind of a trance by dance, this, that, particularly in the people who are in the non-intellectual kind of a group, village group, tamasic group, they dance and they drink and all those things. They go to that kind of a state where they don't have body consciousness. And this happens often in the villages when they do the village religious ceremonies. They will have fire and then people walk on the fire. They walk on the fire because they don't have that body consciousness. They don't experience that. Looking at all those people that they are walking, and intellectuals, who is a scientist, who is so much into the intellect level, if he starts walking on that, his feet will be talking about all kinds of physics formula about walking on that fire. And he will have full of blisters. He cannot take it. So therefore, when you feel the fire, you are feeling the fire because you are at that level. You cannot deny that your experience. So therefore, don't deny your experience. Don't climafate your experience by all kinds of large arguments. Don't do that. Accept these things. Human being survives because that he has this experiencer ego, survives because he has the identifier ego, and then he has also this third ego, which is supposed to be the ego of experiencer and an identifier, and also third is the doer ego. We have to do it ourselves. I might read 100 books on swimming. If I do not touch the water, if I do not try to swim, I cannot know what about that swimming. It so happened a bird took a shelter. It was raining outside, so took a shelter under a chedja. So chedja went inside the window, and then he found out that's a big library, huge library. Went there, search for the books, and there is a book about aerodynamics and all that. Read all the formulae about, because after all the birds fly. So he also thought that it's important to know about the aerodynamics. Opened the book and then started reading that book, and then found out that wingspan should be so much. Why the eagles fly? Because their wingspan is so big and the weight is so less that they can fly. They can arrest their terminal speed and all those things. He started reading, and then looked at himself. He's a small little pigeon, small little window with wings, and then weight is also not big, so much. So he said, oh, okay, according to this aerodynamics, I cannot fly. See, it's very difficult for me to fly because I don't have the wingspan he saw. I don't have all that geometry that he talks about. Weight is so much, so what to do? So the bird, now having read all that, started walking, now not start flying. When that library door opened, came outside, and then into the field where all the pigeons were there. He also went into the pigeon, walking, and then catching and the other saw pigeons were flying. Said, poor fellows, they don't have the knowledge. That's why they are flying. They have not read about aerodynamics. Therefore, they don't understand their wingspan and all. Try to tell a couple of them, educate them, but then the birds do not listen to him. He said, these birds are stupid. They don't even listen to me. a fly. So he is walking and then everywhere, catching whatever it is there by walking and all that. Continuing like that, suddenly one time, one big eagle came. And the moment the eagle came, all the birds flew because it's dangerous. And he also flew along with them, forgot himself for a moment that he read all the aerodynamics. Many times, what happens is that the very knowledge itself becomes a problem for you. The knowledge is good as long as it helps you, but the moment knowledge becomes your ego, I read it, the others did not read it, becomes your asmita, ahankara. So anything that what we have can become our ahankara, because knowledge also is about the world outside, aerodynamics about the world outside, money is about the world outside, everything in the world outside. So therefore, you are in between, and then you identify yourself with the asmita, consciousness. That's what is the useful ego. You identify yourself with the ahankara. What takes you to the world outside is ahankara. It's a bad ego. So asmita is always taking you towards the spirituality. Like for example, whole of sadhana is there. Yes, we have to do the asanas, we have to do the pranayama, we have to do the meditation to see that we identify ourselves with the consciousness. Sadhana becomes an asmita when it takes you towards that consciousness. Whereas the sadhana becomes my ego. I've done this many sadhana, this type of asanas, so many different asanas, so many naudi kriyas that I can do. If all these things that you do, it becomes ahankara for you. So it's you have to decide whether it is asmita or ahankara, positive ego or negative ego, that you are that consciousness. The more and more that you identify yourself with the negative ego, you forgot that you are pure consciousness inside. Then you become the body, material world outside. So let us try to see that what we are, the Indian philosophy, that which takes us to the asmita, the positive ego, we are that. Thank you so much. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Exactly.